This is our first year of using drip tape irrigation, and we want to tell you some pros and cons of what we think of the system. Stay tuned if you want to hear all about that.
So in the past, we've used 1/2-inch poly on our garden, which is another form of drip irrigation. But since we expanded our planting and did more single crop planting, so we did just only tomato gardens and only corn plantings, we wanted to just give drip tape a try since all the spacings would be the same throughout the whole garden.
So we are comparing this to what we know, which is what we know is poly pipe with gallon per hour drippers at each point where there's a plant. When we're referring to our poly pipe drip system that we have in our other garden, this is what we're talking about. So it's poly pipe as the main line, and then poly pipe that goes down, and each plant has a dripper or an emitter at the base of the plant, kind of like this one right here. With drip tape, it comes with predetermined spacing. So our corn is on a foot spacing between each plant, and our tomato garden is on 5 feet spacing between each plant. So we'll just dive right in with the pros, and one of the pros is the fact that you can get like predetermined spacing on the drip tape, and you don't have to punch all of those emitters, because we have spent a ton of money buying drippers or emitters for our poly pipe drip system, and they were already there, and we knew exactly where we're going to plant stuff, and it was nice and even as far as spacing goes.
The drip tape is also cheaper outright. Like you can get 4,000 feet for $250 or so, something like that, depending on what thickness and stuff you get. But yeah, the poly pipe is definitely more expensive. You have to get your pipe, and then you get the emitters, and the emitters are 10 packs, and they're about, I don't know, $4 per 10 pack. So if you have 100 plants, you're going to have to get 10 packs.
And if you keep expanding like we do, then you buy a lot more drippers throughout the years.
And drippers break, so you end up replacing them throughout the years and whatnot.
Or they get really clogged, and then you end up replacing those. So the drippers can kind of be expensive on the poly pipe, but we're talking about drip tape, and with drip tape, no need to buy drippers, so that is pretty awesome. Another really good thing that we've liked about drip tape is it was super easy to put together. When we set it up, we just rolled out all of our runs, and then we had everything connected to a main leader run, which is out of this type of stuff, this poly pipe, and it was just really easy to put together. We just did our different runs, a certain amount of space, and plugged it all together and set it up. So that was really easy. And then also when we go to take all this down, because we're at the end of our season, the corn's even done. We're at the end of our season, and we're about to be taking everything down here as soon as we get our frost and things really die back a lot. And we're planning on unplugging every single run and stacking them up on the side of the garden. And with this system, unplugging them will be really easy and slick. And that's going to be really a pro for drip tape.
Drip tape is more cost effective, especially if you're doing a big garden or a big planting. I would recommend looking into drip tape over the poly pipe. It's just going to be way more cost effective. And we had good success with it. I'm very happy with it this year.
So another pro is it was definitely a lightweight material, which will be space saving when we do go to put it to the side at the end of the year. It'll be easy to move everything, I'm thinking. So that's another pro, is just that it's lightweight, space saving. Also, if you're just looking for a system to irrigate at the base of every plant, drip tape is awesome, because we're not overhead watering this stuff. We didn't want to overhead water our tomatoes, of course. Corn we could have if we'd had it set up, but we just didn't have that set up. So it's a great way to put water at the base of every plant. Similar, though, to poly pipe with emitters.
Yep. It saves water. So you're pumping less water, you're using less electricity, and you're not wasting as much water due to evaporation. So all in all, those are all good things of any drip system you might run, whether it be drip tape or poly pipe.
Yep. And another pro we've noticed is that we've had some questions about if the water went all the way to the very end and it had even pressure from the beginning to the end, and I would say it did. Now, you might notice like this plant is smaller, but when we put this field in, we spread manure, and the manure probably didn't get to the very edges of the field, so that's probably why. But I mean, if you go 4 plants in, we have some very decent sized corn stalks back there, so I would say it was even as far as water distribution, and that was a pro.
And yeah, everything was pretty uniform growth on our cornfield here. And the outside edges just have to compete with other plants, I think, in the unbroken ground and whatnot. So between the fertilizer and that, I think that's why you get a little stunted on the outside row. But yeah, I think it's no fault due to watering. This corn patch is about 100 feet long by 100 feet wide.
So that kind of gives you an idea of how far we are running one span of drip tape in this particular field. Now, if we were to go 300 feet, I don't know if we would have that same answer because we haven't done it.
You have to do the math on your end as far as like how much water your pump puts out and how many gallons of water you're putting onto your field. Because if your pump can't keep up with how many gallons your drippers are trying to put out, it's not going to work. So you have to do that math ahead of time on your own.
Yep. Which is part of the reason why we have multiple different gardens, all with different timers on them and different irrigation systems.
Yeah, if we ran everything all at once, our pump wouldn't be able to keep up, and we wouldn't have
the pressure.
We wouldn't get water on all our plants. So we have to stagger them out throughout the day.
Yep. So those are all the pros about drip tape. Now we're going to get into some of the cons.
While drip tape might be less expensive up front, we haven't done a long-term test as far as knowing how much it'll hold up. If it all is split in half at the end of this year, it's going to be a lot less appealing as far as cost.
Now, the biggest con we have definitely noticed is that this stuff expands and contracts with the temperature. So when your nights cool off, it will contract. And when your days get really hot, it will expand. This was super frustrating. In this cornfield, we ended up needing to add bungee cords to the end of every row in order to keep things tight and to withstand that expansion and contraction, because we needed the dripper to stay at the base of the plant and not get all wonky. And that is what we had to do to solve that problem. And it worked, and they stayed once we did that. But that was definitely a con, because with the poly pipe, that doesn't happen nearly as much. Things will expand and contract a little, but things will mostly stay where you put them. With this, it was a huge, drastic expansion and contraction over this 100-foot run.
You'd watch the line during the middle of the day, and you'd have a big bow in it.
Yep, and a bunch of them. Yep. And so that led to the other con of this stuff. Like I said, it's lightweight, but also we get a lot of wind here in Montana. And this strip tape blew all over the place before we had that bungee system in place and before things were properly staked down. So we had, I think, 2 different times we came out and fixed the drip tape when we had these little corn plants just germinating or really tiny little plants. So the fact that they blow all over the place is definitely a con if you don't have them properly secured.
Most of the more commercial people that use this stuff, they bury it as they lay it out. Mm-hmm. And so we might need to learn or figure out a way to do that in the future.
Yep. So right now, this is just laid on top of the ground is how we did it this year. But in the future, we might do that. We'll see. We're still learning. First year with drip tape.
One other thing about the drip tape is they water about 1/3 of a gallon an hour versus our poly pipe emitters are doing 1 gallon an hour. Mm-hmm. And so it does take a little while longer to get the necessary amount of water down in every plant.
Yep, and that's with the particular kind of drip tape we bought. Maybe there's other drip tape that waters.
There is different tape has different amounts of water every emitter puts out. So if you wanted one to put out more water quicker, you might be able to find that, but that's just what we found.
Yep, so that's something to think about if you're looking to change over to this system for irrigating your gardens.
One other thing throughout the summer we had issues with it was we have our tomato cages, and they blew over once or twice. The tomato cage tipped over a little bit, and then it would stand back up, and the spike on the bottom of the cage that holds it in the ground would go through the tape and then have a gusher that I had to go splice and cut and put a splice in. In the poly pipe, it's much thicker and it doesn't get penetrated that easily. It's a lot more durable.
Yep. So our poly pipe, we've had our poly pipe. Some of it came from our old house. We've had it upwards of 10 years, and we've never replaced it. We've added to it, and we've added drippers, and we've changed the way it's laid out, but we've used a lot of our original poly pipe, so it's lasted for a long time. I don't know how the drip tape is going to hold up, so that could potentially be a con, but we don't know enough to speak about it yet. But it is a little fragile, I would say, for being punctured.
When you set up your drip tape, you need to get a pressure reducer put in on your hose bib. And I think that goes down to 15 psi. If I remember right, it's like 8 to 15 psi is desirable. And if you don't do that, it'll get uneven watering and also can blow caps off the end of your tape on the end of your runs. So you need to put that on there.
So that's just a little bit of a con, just that you need to be thinking about that, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's definitely doable. Not a huge deal. The last con that we could think of as far as our drip system this year is that if you didn't have a giant garden and you weren't just doing a dedicated crop, it might be a little frustrating to people that it is a predetermined spacing with this is a foot spacing, or a tomato garden is a 5-foot spacing. You could mix and match your rows though to meet your garden needs, but that might be a con for some people. For us, that was kind of a pro. But for some people that might be a con, so we put it on the cons list.
If you're doing a big mixed garden like our other garden over there, poly pipe with the emitters might be a little nicer just because you can customize, like do a real tight spacing on one row and then the same row further down. You can space things out further apart if you wanted to.
Yeah. So all in all, we really have liked the drip tape so far. We're just really hoping it holds up over time, which we can't speak about that quite yet. But we do think that for a bigger setup, drip tape is a really nice way to go, and especially if you don't want to buy all those emitters. But if you want a smaller, more customizable garden space, we think polypipe with drip emitters is a really nice system, and we've been using it for years, and just the durability of it is hard to beat, I guess. And we leave our polypipe outside all year long. It's exposed to all the elements. We don't coil it up. We just kind of take it apart and set it off on the side. We're planning on doing the same with this, and that other stuff has held up that well, so I'm hoping this stuff holds up as well also.
At least for a couple of years, that could be all that you can really expect of it, and I'd be happy with that. So as long as it's not just a one and done use.
Yeah. Or like at least 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
a little while.
With us being more market gardeners now instead of just home gardeners and growing stuff to preserve, we're going to be using more and more drip tape because we're going to do bigger and bigger fields of things. So it'll be in our future.
So thanks for checking out this video on our pros and cons of drip tape after our first year of using it. If you like the kind of stuff that we're putting on our channel, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.